Two, three,
Well,
four.
hello, everybody, and welcome to the Carolina Catholics. Today, we have three very interesting topics to go over today. We're going to talk about companion saints. And for those who don't know what they are, a companion saint is somebody that a Catholic picks to be like a spiritual role model to help them lead a life more fulfilling and closer to Christ. We'll also be talking about the Pope and everyone's favorite president, Joe Biden. All righty. So, Tom, I'm gonna let you start off today, and I'm gonna ask you, who is your companion saint, and why did you pick him? And could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so my companion saint is Sir Thomas More. He was Chancellor of the United Kingdom under the reign of King Henry VIII. He held multiple titles. He was also Speaker of the House of Commons, and he was a public servant, right? And so, for those who know, I've work in politics. I've done that for the past decade, and that public servant understanding is really what made me land on Sir Thomas More, but that's not what led me there. The first person I started looking into, I found out the guy wasn't a saint later, which I think is a travesty. It needs to be revisited by the church. Bishop Tommaso de Vio, right? And Tommaso de Vio was Italian. He was the ambassador that reconciled the Papal States with Venice. So he was a politician himself. He gave up his wealthy political life to embrace the church, ended up joining the clergy, founded his own religious order, ended up becoming bishop. And then at the peak of his career, he was the leader of the Counter-Reformation. He was the man who sat directly in front of Martin Luther and asked him to recant his heresies. And so I was immediately gravitated to his story because I'm like, well, I'm a recovering Protestant. Maybe it'd be interesting to sit on the other side of the table.
Aren't
But
we all recovering Protestants?
yeah, but come to
Yeah.
find out, he has not actually been declared a saint because of personal things in his life. That's a status that could change, though. He's got a significant following, and they're constantly reassessing things. There's also a little bit of a controversy because his name is Thomas Cajetan, not just Tommaso de Vio. And so there's a Saint Cajetan that lived at the exact same time. And so the history records are a little muffled. They might be the same person. We don't know. But that's up for debate. The historians will have to settle that one. So he might be a saint. He might not be a saint. I don't know. We'll find out.
Well,
Uh,
let's hope that he is.
yeah.
And
But I was drawn to the counter reformers immediately, right? And I told Denny at church, I was like, these guys are fantastic because they knew how to fight, you know. They were bare knuckle brawlers. They knew what was right, and they were throwing down to make it happen. And it's my personal belief that we need that energy today. We need our folks to be as on fire for the church as they were in that time. And so I believe that with every fiber of my being. And so I landed on Sir Thomas More. Thomas More famously sparred with Martin Luther himself. He wrote letters condemning him, combating him like that. But he was a public servant in the king's service, and King Henry VIII ended up entering into schism against the church. The Protestants will talk about how King Henry VIII killed, I can't remember the guy's name, the guy who wrote the King James Bible, the English translation, right? King Henry VIII killed him for challenging his authority as monarch with an illicit Bible translation. And they blamed the Catholic Church for this, but the same king who did that went on to kill Thomas More for supporting the Catholic Church. And so the Protestants have just totally missed the plot on that one. That whole story is just a sad tale of King Henry VIII, which is a whole play. And King Henry VIII, his wife would not bear children for him. She was barren. And so he divorced her and wanted to get remarried, but the Pope would not annul his prior marriage. And so this caused political upheaval in the United Kingdom. I think it might have just been English, but I don't know. The United Kingdom today. A lot of upheaval because if he did not produce an heir, it would have triggered a civil war upon his death. And so the church got totally sidelined in favor of politics. And these folks had no faith that, like Abraham and Sarah, God would give them a child. The king had no faith. He rejected that message of the church and ended up going into schism, founding what we know today as the Anglican Church of England. And not Martin Luther, the king killed Sir Thomas More because he would not consent to the marriage of the king to his new wife. And so he was beheaded at the Tower of London after 3 years of being tortured, starved, etc. And so Thomas More is the patron saint of public servants and a leader of the Counter Reformation. And so that's why I picked Thomas More.
Wow, what a fascinating story. So, how do you think his commitment to his principles and faith, even in the face of adversity, can inspire us?
Yeah, it's such a topical thing. We'll talk about Joe Biden later in the segment, but we look at what happened at the debate the other day. Everybody was so shocked that Joe Biden is not able to be president because he's got dementia or some other health concern. And so the country is now without a leader, or it's being run by unelected bureaucrats, and there are disruptions in the chain of command. And this creates a national security crisis as we're on the verge of World War III. But what stood out to me in this whole story is in an entire White House administration, not one staffer blew the whistle on this fact. Not one doctor, not one press assistant, not one person stood up like Sir Thomas More to resist the king. Not
I think
one person.
they actually said he was qualified to hold that position, didn't
They
they? I mean,
lied. And they call it cheap fakes, right? The videos of Joe Biden having his mental lapses on camera called them cheap fakes. Oh, because we're the bad people for noticing that the guy with the nuclear codes has mental health condition.
all
Okay.
right, well, let's
Anyway,
give Jim some time on the mic here. Okay, Jim, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All righty. Why don't you go ahead and tell us who your companion saint is and how you came to choose him?
Ignore a phone call from my mother. So my patron saint is Saint Brendan. He was born in 484 AD and died 577 AD. He was one of the patron saints of Ireland and the head of the 12 apostles of Ireland. His journey was traveling across dangerous waters, and he was converting mass pagans, of course, by masses.
Wow.
St. Patrick, St. Patrick was one of his disciples during his time in Ireland. Now, I don't recall exactly where he was born in Ireland, but I know his father was also a fisherman, and his mother was pretty much, the equivalent of a modern day stay-at-home mom. But his story captivated towards me because at the time I was already, excuse me. Yes, mother, I'm home. I just got a text message from my mother. His story gravitated towards me because at the time I was already trending waters, so to speak, whenever I found the Roman Catholic Church. He was able to go from the Mid-Atlantic Ocean all the way across the Irish Seas during his journeys. And it was what was called the Isles of the Blessed. So, I mean, he was a very rough and tough kind of dude, I mean, not necessarily like that's what I'm role modeling after him, but it was the journey itself that resonated with me.
Wow. So, how do you think Saint Brendan's voyages and sense of adventure inspire us as the Carolina Catholics?
Well, because we're on a sense of adventure of ourselves, man. And we're trending the waters. We're trying to reach the people. We're pretty much doing the modern day thing of what Brendan did by going out, trending the waters, seeking out new people, trying to gain converts and save souls for the church.
Mm, dang, that's really interesting. So to move on, I'd like to talk about my saint that I picked. And even though I'm not confirmed yet. I'm leaning toward Saint Irenaeus of Lyon. He is the patron saint over catechesis and apologetics. I'm a big fan of apologetics, and he actually wrote against the heresies and battled the Gnostics. He's quite similar to Thomas More from what I was hearing Tom talk about. And I just feel a natural calling toward him to be able to go out and have these tough conversations with charity and be a student of the Catholic faith as well. And all three together really paint a picture of what we want Carolina Catholics to be. All righty. So we're going to move right along. Who's ready to talk about the Pope? So, Jibs has already got you here. I'm going to ask you, what is the Pope's most important role?
The Pope's most important role is to teach faith and morals, to lead the church, to be the Bishop of Rome. That is his lead role, in the grand scheme of things. When a Pope is not doing the above things that I just mentioned, we're treading dangerous waters in that scenario.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Tom, what do you think of what is the most important role of the Pope?
The Pope is a complex position. His job is to be steward of the church. The last episode I talked about stewardship and how there was a gross lack of it in our society today. And this Pope, he's not really done a very good job of stewarding the church. We've seen a lot of chaos, division, poor communication. And he's also supposed to be the pastor for world leaders, is another informal role. And he doesn't really do that. He seems more interested in being the popular Pope. You'll talk to folks in the Vatican and they'll say, "Did you know the Pope had a 68% approval rating?" Oh, I had no idea the Pope had a 68% approval rating. The world leaders, Emmanuel Macron, the German leaders, Angela Merkel, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, these folks have a very positive view of the Pope, but none of them are Catholic. And I want to repeat that. None of them are Catholic. And that says a lot about the Pope's pastoral care of the church at this time, that none of the world leaders that he is supposed to personally shepherd have taken an interest in any of his teachings. And this isn't how it used to be. The Pope is also, as a matter of fact, literally a king. He is a monarch over the Vatican, which is a territory, a nation in the middle of Rome, Italy. And it is sovereign, it is independent, it has its own military with the Swiss Guard, and so there is a leadership there that, the Pope is supposed to have over the people, over the church, over the parishes themselves, the diocesan structure, all of it. And we can complain about the Pope as well, but at the same time, a lot of these problems have been persistent for a very long time, and we can theorize about why that is. But the Pope needs to be doing more than he has been. I'll leave it at that.
Jim, any thoughts to that?
Yeah, like whenever you're the pastor of the largest church denomination on earth, God's kingdom on earth, and you're not willing to meet with world leaders on just about any issue, like we said today in church, all he would have to do is go to Israel. Go to Israel, and you'd be surprised how many mass converts that the church could obtain. All those souls that we could save just by his presence being there. And he's not even willing to do that. But he's willing to elect or allow China to elect communist bishops into the church.
Really? He's electing communist bishops into the church? Wow.
Supposedly, from what I've read into the sphere of things, that these are some of the things that he has done.
So, from what I've read, Pope Francis is known for his mercy, his compassion, and his humility. How has he shown that as his current role as the Pope?
While he is known for his compassion and his, and his mercy, it's been shown in the opposite of which ways he wants it to be shown, because he has been very compassionate and he has been very uh, merciful towards some of the masses that people want to have compared to the ones that we're constrained to.
Tom, what are your thoughts?
I think he's very misunderstood a lot of times as well. A lot of the complaints I might have about the Pope aren't always necessarily his fault. For example, the communist bishop in China, that's a real thing, and that is scandalous. But you have to understand that Christians are not allowed in China. I mean, it is formally banned in many provinces, and so you could only have a communist bishop in China. There's no other way that you could have a bishop in China. But the Pope is in that scenario, bending the knee to a world leader, when that resurgent, uh, you know, uh, martyr attitude that Catholics are so known for would convert way more people than compliance. So we can debate the tactics and the strategy there, but that's the compassion of the Pope in a nutshell. He is attempting to reach Chinese people with a communist pope, with a communist bishop, sorry, Freudian slip. And he's compassionately trying to reach the Chinese people, but the tactics he's chosen to do it are not beneficial or effective, in my opinion. But I'm just a lay person. What do I know?
Hey, we're all there with you. Jim, this question is going to go to you. Why do you think so much of the U.S. Catholics disapprove of the Pope?
Well, it will come in a later episode that we're going to do, but a lot of that has to come from the trad Catholics, such as myself and Tom here in America. And it has to do with the traditional Latin Mass and the Pope's willingness to restrict the highest form of Mass. And it's not just that, but when you're not teaching faith and morals and you're focusing on the political side of it all, you're no longer speaking ex cathedral. You are speaking modernism. And I think modernism is the biggest complaint that comes from the American right.
What do you think, Tom?
The modernism is so dangerous, for a reason. It causes leaders to lose the plot, so to speak. People have lost respect for the Pope, especially in right-wing circles, but even in left-wing circles as well, you'll learn. And that's because the Pope, how do I word this? The world is on fire right now, literally on the verge of World War III. We did COVID, these worldwide lockdowns and shutdowns of the economy. 100 million people died of starvation and dehydration as a result of the economic lockdowns. 100 million people. But this Pope has time to talk about blessing gay couples. He has time to talk about the communist bishops, and he has time to talk about Pachamamas. Thank goodness this Pope has time to talk about gay unions while the world burns. That's the danger of modernism, right? Where the Pope cannot possibly offer the pastoral leadership we need because he's so preoccupied with unimportant things in order to keep people happy. And so he's got to rediscover that monarch authority that he has, because he literally is a monarch, as I said, and he needs to reign with authority. And he tries to do it, but it only ever comes down on right-wing people, and then it just looks mean and petty. It's not from a place of strength.
That's true. We're going to have to move on to our next segment,
Absolutely.
Tom. So let's let Jim start with this one. The political debate was this last Thursday. Jim, what were your thoughts of how Joe Biden carried himself to that debate?
In all honesty, I actually felt bad for Joe Biden and how he carried himself. His cognitive state of mind is just, you can tell it's impaired. He wanted to ramble and barely even got out of sentence at the time. Whenever he's like the idea, you know, it was very, very repetitive. He didn't really offer any insight to the legit criticisms Donald Trump gave him of his poor presidency. Let's be honest. Look at the border. Whenever they started talking immigration, I thought not Donald Trump, because he actually won that debate. But when it came to Joe Biden, whenever immigration gets brought up or any of the policies reflect negatively on him, you could tell the man wanted to have a stroke. He like practically looked half dead.
Yep. Well, Tom, do you want to give us your thoughts on the presidential debate and Joe Biden?
I've thought this for a while. It feels like the story of Isaiah, you know? If you ever read Isaiah, that's the destruction of Jerusalem. You know, it talks about the Babylonians being brought to the gates of Jerusalem and then burning the Jewish temple to the ground. But it talks about what led up to it as well. You know, the Jewish people denied God. They embraced a life of sin. They refused to repent and return to Him. And it resulted in the Jewish people not being able to hear the truth, see the truth, or speak the truth. And, you know, that mass confusion that led the way to the Babylonians being able to just walk into Jerusalem. The gates were just completely undefended. And I look at the state of America today, and it's like the leader of the country has dementia. The world leaders are gathering the Babylonians. They're invading Ukraine. Wars are breaking out left and right. There's an immigration crisis at the border. I saw this image a while back of these immigrants coming up from South America through Mexico, and they had this cross that said "Viva Cristo Rey" on it, "Long live Christ the King." And this cross was going at the front of the immigration column, and I thought to myself, yeah, God himself has brought the Babylonians to the gates because we cannot repent of our sins. And I see that reflected in this president. He is the epitome of cannot hear the truth, see the truth, or speak the truth. And folks need to reflect on that because the Bible tells us that poor leaders are raised up from the midst of us, right? And so Joe Biden is, in fact, our fault. Your fault, our neighbor's fault. You know, we, the American people, are solely responsible for this. And that's a lesson that we need to really take to heart, I think.
I think I will, and I will promise to try and do better. But yeah, it worried me seeing the mental state of the leader of the free world. He talks to our sophisticated adversaries and our enemies, and that's what they're hearing. If that wouldn't embolden them to do the stuff that they're doing now, I don't know what else would. And that was a very good picture you painted. But that's all the time we have for the day. Jim, Tom, yeah, fantastic getting to hear from y'all like always. And good night, everybody.
Absolutely. God bless you too.
God bless.